In this segment, we're going to be looking at dividing integers, and we're going to have to make sure that we show the connection between multiplication and division. As in multiplication, I will attempt to show the division in three different ways: the groups technique, the opposite of technique, and the area model with the flip technique. When we talked about multiplication, we say that multiplication works commutatively, so it doesn't matter if it's 2 times 4 or 4 times 2. 2 times 4 could be saying I have two groups of 4, or it could be I have groups of 2 4 times. Not too hard to understand when we do multiplication. That double understanding becomes more confusing with division. So this question that we have up here, 8 divided by 2, could mean that I have 8 things, and I want to divide it into two groups. How big would each group have to be? The other way of looking at it is, I have 8 things, I have groups of 2, how many groups are there? And I'll try to explain both of those techniques, or both of those meanings, with this question up here. So in this question I have positive 8 divided by positive 2. It could mean that I have 8 positive things, and I want to divide them into adding two groups. So if I had to add two groups to get to my 8, what kinds of groups would I have to add? So if I had to add two groups, I could add one group of positive 4, and I could add another group of positive 4, and that would give me my positive 8. So if I had positive 8, and I wanted to divide it into adding two groups of something, the things I would have to add would be two groups of 4. So my answer would have to be positive 4. The other way I could think of that question, I wanted to get to positive 8, but I wanted to find out how many groups of positive 2 I had to do. So if I have groups of positive 2, how would I get to positive 8? Again, I would have to add 4 groups of positive 2. So my answer again would be positive 4. I'd have to add 4 groups of positive 2 to get to my positive 8. I've moved my previous question over to the left, and I'm working on the question over here on the right in the blue. So this question says I start off with negative 8, and I want to divide it into two groups, and what's the size of my groups? Or I could ask, I'm starting off with negative 8, I have groups of positive 2, what would I have to do to get a negative 8? So if I look at it, negative 8 divided by positive 2, and I say negative 8, if I want to add two groups, what would the size of my group have to be? Well, to get negative 8, if I added one group of negative 4 and another group of negative 4, I would have added, plus 2, added two groups of negative 4, so my answer is going to be negative 4. What's the size of each group? Each group would have to have a size of negative 4. The other way of looking at this question, if I want to get to negative 8, and I want to find out how many groups of positive 2 is it going to take, there are no groups of positive 2. I don't care how many I add to this, there's no way that I could add groups of positive 2 and get to a negative 8 answer. So this is where I'm going to have to use my zero pair again. So here's my 8, and the question says how many groups of positive 2 can I add to get to negative 8? I can't, but what I can do is I can take away groups of positive 2. So if I take one group away, I took another group away, I take another group of positive 2 away, and I take away another group of positive 2, I will be left with negative 8. So the question says, if I have negative 8 and I want to divide by positive 2, I didn't add 4 groups, I took away 4 groups, and that's what my answer is going to be negative 4. I took away 4 groups of positive 2, there they are, the 4 groups of positive 2, and it left me with my negative 8. That one's a little bit more confusing. I think the easier one would be how many groups, I have to add 2 groups of what to get to negative 8? 2 groups of negative 4. I think that one's the easier of the two. In this question, negative 8 divided by negative 2, I could think of it as I have negative 8, and I want to find out how many sets of negative 2 do I have. What would I do with negative 2 sets to get to 8? Well, I could add 4 groups of negative 2. There's one set. Here's the other set. Here's the other set. And here's the other set. So I could add 4 groups of negative 2, and so therefore my answer to this question is positive 4. And it's positive 4 because I added 4 groups. I could add 4 groups of negative 2 and get to negative 8. The other way of looking at this question, if I had negative 8 and the question says divided by negative 2, that could be saying if I would take away 2 groups, negative 2, what would the groups have to be? So if I have negative 8 and I want to take away 2 groups, what would the groups have to be? So if I have negative 8 and I want to take away 2 groups, what size does the group have to be? So if I took away one group of positive 4, and I took away another group of positive 4, I would be left with my negative 8. So if I have my negative 8 and I want to take away 2 groups, what size do my groups have to be? My groups have to be positive 4. So negative 8 divided by negative 2 is positive 4. On this question we have positive 8 divided by negative 2. So if I want to have positive 8 and I want to take away 2 groups of something, what size would my group have to be? So I want to be left with positive 8 and I need to take away 2 groups. So I need to take away 2 groups of, there's one group and there's the other group I need to take away in order to be able to leave me with my 8 yellows. So if I go 8 divided by negative 2, I'm taking away 2 groups. How big does each group have to be? Each group has to be negative 4. So positive 8 divided by negative 2 is negative 4. And the other way of looking at this question, if I have positive 8 and I have groups of negative 2, how many do I have to add? Well, I can't add groups of negative 2 to get to a positive 8, and so therefore I'm going to have to take some groups away. So if I'm taking away groups of negative 2, there's one group of negative 2, and there's another group of negative 2, and there's another group of negative 2, and there's another group of negative 2. So I took 4 groups away. So I took away, I didn't add, I took away, so my answer is negative. Take away, and I did it 4 times, so my answer is negative 4. So again, positive 8 divided by negative 2 is negative 4. Now in this video I'm trying to show all the different possible ways of understanding and showing, so as a teacher or as a parent, I'm not sure if I would show all of these. I would find whichever way makes the most sense to my student or my child and make sure we understand how that works. So with that idea, I'm going to talk about the opposite of. So if we have this question, 8 divided by 2 is positive 4. If one of these numbers here in my question is opposite, so let's take this question. Instead of positive 8 divided by 2 is 4, if I have negative 8 divided by 2 is a 4, that can't be the same 4 because it's not the same number. So I'm starting with a positive 8 and here I'm starting with a negative 8. So I've done something that's the opposite. So I've changed the opposite of positive 8 to negative 8. So my answer has to be the opposite of positive 4, which would be negative 4. If we do that with the other question, so we take that one out of the way and we put this one in its place. If 8 divided by 2 is 4, the 8's are the same here, but the 2's are opposites. So I can't get the same answer on this question as I do on this question because I'm not asking the same things. So if 8 divided by 2 is 4, then 8 divided by negative 2 has to be the opposite of that, which is negative 4. And for the last one, if we have negative 8 divided by positive 2 is negative 4, then if I take negative 8 and I divide it by negative 2, I have an opposite. The 8's are the same, but the 2's are different. So negative 8 divided by positive 2 is negative 4. So negative 8 divided by negative 2 has to be the opposite of that, which is positive 4. So again, we can talk about the opposites and we can play around with lots of different combinations, but if they know one pair, they can figure out what the other one would be based on its opposite. And as we discussed with division in the array model, we write the product of our multiplication here and our 2 factors on the sides and the top. In a division question, we would do the question maybe in the long division method, and I apologize for my printing here, 2, and then we use this divided by symbol 8. So the divisor is over here on the left hand side, and our quotient is at the top, and our dividend is in the middle. So in this question here, here's my 2 going into 8, or my 8 is being divided into 2 pieces, what would have to be the number of pieces that I do? So to complete our array, we know we have 2 rows because it says it has to be 2 rows here, and therefore I need to have 4 columns. So 8 divided by 2 would have to be positive 4. There's no flips or no switches, there's no opposites, so it's pretty straightforward. If our question becomes positive 8 divided by negative 2, my array would look like this. I have positive 8 divided by negative 2, and I want to find out what has to go on the top. Well, on the top I need to have 4 columns, so I know I'm going to have 4 circles, but what color would they have to be? If I left them as yellow or positive, that really wouldn't work because I know I have 4, but because I have one of my factors as being red, it means the opposite of, that means I need to do a flip. And if I flip this, I wouldn't end up getting positive 8. In order to get my positive 8 here in the center, and I have one flip on the side, I'm going to need another flip to flip them back to positives again. So because I have 2 flips, I would end up back to my positive answer, so therefore my answer has to be a negative 4. And that's that 2 negatives make a positive idea that we talked about at the end of multiplication. And my question is now negative 8 divided by positive 2. There's my negative 8 in my dividend. There's my positive 2 in my divisor. I'm looking for my quotient. And I know I'm going to have 4 because I've got 2 rows, but I need 4 columns. So I know it's going to have to be 4, but what color does it have to be? If I had yellows along the top, there would be no flips involved, and there would be no way of getting a red 8. So if I need to get a red 8, I need to have a red set of numbers on the top, so my answer is going to be negative 4. And so therefore my answer is going to be negative 4. 2 times 4 is 8, and I need to have one flip to get a red 8 here in the middle, so therefore these have to be red, so therefore my answer has to be negative 4. And finally I have negative 8 divided by negative 2. I need to have 4 columns, so therefore my answer is going to be 4, but what color will it be? Well, I need to have a red 8, which means I need one flip in my answers. So I already have a flip here, so my quotient piece does not require me to have a flip. And therefore I can get away with having positive 4. Positive 4 times negative 2 gives me 8. This causes me to have one flip. My answer has one flip, and therefore my answer is positive 4. So we can see that division is quite confusing because there's lots of meanings to the different statements. It could be groups of, or how many groups, and then we have to add in the positive and negative aspect of it. So find one technique of the 3 that I mentioned that seems to make sense for students. I find the flip one is the easiest one for students to understand, especially once they understand the flips in multiplication, but you could do whichever one makes more sense to the students that you're teaching or working with.